Hi guys, this is awesome. You know who I am, I'm Machine, and you know who he is, that's SirScoots. And we are going to have a great time now. No script, no plan.
Uh-oh.
I just decided, and you decided, that this would be a good opportunity to sit down and kind of give you a follow-on from the PEA and the players' rights kind of debacle that's been going on at the moment. I mean, it's a topic of discussion, and you've been kind of at the spearhead of the assault. So it's going to be kind of great just to pick your brain and maybe kind of discuss it further.
Sure.
First things first, though, for everyone at home, how would you summarize what's been happening in the, let's leave the organizations out, but in terms of players' rights, why has this suddenly become such a big topic of discussion?
Well, I don't necessarily know if it's sudden because, and as you and I both know, being like kind of in the Counter-Strike scene, the players themselves for the last couple years have been very loosely trying to organize their voice, right, in Skype groups. And
when you say loosely, it is, guys, do you want to join our Skype group?
Yeah, Skype groups and WhatsApp groups, and the Euros doing a little group, and the North Americans, and then kind of a combined group last year, and just trying to, they all compete, obviously, in servers, but at the end of the day, they're all slowly starting to realize that they are the same labor force that kind of makes this game, right? And they have, while they have, again, their differences, they also have a whole laundry list of things that they all agree on as players in the sport, right? So the PEA situation just became, I think, the spearhead issue for them, especially the North American guys, obviously, because that's who it affected mostly. Right. Those 7 teams, or 6 teams plus TSM, if they were to qualify, kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
six of the PEA teams are EPL already, and TSM was qualifying, and they have now qualified.
Roger that, yeah.
Yeah. So this came out of those conversations that they've been having for a couple years. Over the last year or so, I've had lots of conversations, and Richard Lewis talked to them a lot. He tried to start up an association for them and try to get the ball rolling for them, because often, you need to look at outside help when you're doing these kind of things, because they're so busy doing their job, whether it's training or traveling or actually, practicing all those things. So, all of us over the last couple of years have said to these players, like, hey, man, if you need any help, if you need any assistance, any consult, we're here for you. We get it.
Yeah.
And so I think the North American guys, when the PEA thing came up, in their minds, when they realized it was a big issue, they then came to me to help them with the issue. But then it very quickly turned to, okay, well, these are the kind of issues that a player association would deal with, would help facilitate, and all those kind of things. So, and that's where we're at now. We're going from we've settled the PEA issue.
Yep, resolved.
That's all resolved and moving forward, and now we're working on the structure and how to build a player association for this sport versus, because player associations exist in every major sport on the planet.
Absolutely.
Right, and especially in my country, like all the major sports.
Do they exist for any esports titles?
No.
Not
anything in a organized, like, solid legal way. I think some of the other games definitely have the same kind of thing, a group of players here and a group of players here that talk behind the scenes to kind of make sure that they're all at least on the same page on stuff.
Sure.
I certainly believe that they all should be thinking about it. 5-6 years ago, maybe not so important because there's not a whole lot of money swirling around. Guys are making a little bit of money. Teams are making just a little bit of money, if anything, and everyone's just kind of working for travel and gear and kind of the exposure.
Yeah.
But we now have all of that. Everyone's getting paid. Everyone's getting investment from the ownership side to the league side. Yeah. Teams are forming with player and investment. All sorts of crazy stuff's happening. So there's millions and millions of dollars now swirling around. And again, it just leads to, just like you see the teams kind of getting more organized, it just makes perfect sense that the players themselves, as the main labor force of this, also kind of unify their voice.
Right, and so this is something you've been investigating, as in, I'm assuming there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through to establish something like this, right?
For sure.
How long has this process been going on for you?
The players reached out to me in mid-November when they realized there was a potential issue between PEA and EPL and this lack of right to choose EPL.
Yeah.
And so after a good chunk of time working behind the scenes, that led to that open letter. So there was quite a bit of work in negotiation before the open letter between all the parties involved, so to speak, that there was no resolution.
And we have to explore this, because I was saying to you just before we went in, I was like, that letter looked like it took so much time, because every paragraph was like composed in a way that you could tell there was an objective and there was the research had been done. I mean, I'm guessing that was not a one draft wonder.
No, it definitely took a while. And again, like as I explained to the players before I wrote it, I go, this is what this letter is going to be. It's going to explain a timeline of what has been said in public, what has happened and has been said to you guys in private, what I have been told in the meetings now that I'm involved, and let's just show that their plan, their idea changed dramatically from when they launched, and for
With
whatever
evidence,
reason.
with evidence.
With
That's
evidence, yeah. Not trying to make anyone a bad guy. Owners wanting to have another kind of business rolling around their teams. Got no issue with that, right? Yes, it took a while to write. I'm not the greatest writer, so
Could have fooled me.
I'm just I'm a much better talker, right? So when I start writing, I write like I talk, and then I have to go back to almost every sentence and go, okay, that needs to be tweaked a little bit. That needs to be tweaked a little bit.
Right.
But in some regards, the letter was easy to write because it was very chronological. This is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened, and this is what happened. And again, it was kind of the last straw the players had. All private negotiations had ceased. The outcome was going to be no EPL for these teams,
Right.
and we didn't necessarily want. It's the last thing you kind of want to do is go public, right? When we see like players tweet at tournament organizers or at team owners, or we jump on Twitter and go, United Airlines are terrible. Like everyone does it, right?
Yeah, and it's a snap judgment.
Yeah, and again, the reason everyone does it is it can tend to be very, very effective, right? And that's
100%.
We got to the point that was our only option. Like it was over. They were about to lose their EPL slots in several days from when I dropped that letter. It was over, right? Everyone had walked away from the table between EPL and PEA, and again, they were about to be out of the biggest league on the planet. So that's why, again, not necessarily the thing I wanted to do. You don't want to create necessarily that kind of stink in the industry, but sometimes you kind of have to.
Right.
And so the letter dropped.
And finding someone to do this, I think it needs to be highlighted that it's not easy to find someone to represent a player union. I remember there was discussions, you don't want an active player, really. I mean, there's no, like you said, there's no time in their schedules. You don't really want a member of the constant talent because, again, no time, but also, there's conflict of interest with leagues and stuff. And so you kind of, there's a very short list of people that have the skills and the kind of criteria that can do what you're doing. That's true. I mean, there's very few people that can do that and do it in a way that has, you're not here to burn bridges. You are entirely here because of the players, right? And I mean, where does that passion for the players come from? Where does it spawn? Is this because of the player inside of you?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. My love of Counter-Strike is this is the game that brought me to esports. Yeah. It's done very well financially for me over the years between the companies I owned. I was a player. I'm like the second oldest player on the esports earning website. So and I've always been a very, very, in all my stuff in esports, whether I was at Gottfrag helping run the website and then the TV side of it, just always been a very player-centric guy. Like it's all, to me, just like sports, like you need all the other parts of the machine, but there is no sport without the athlete, and there's no esport without the player, right? It doesn't exist. So I think out of my love of the game, being a player myself, and when I was on EG as one of the owners, I was very player. That's why I joined. I'm like, I can help a specific chunk of players for a while, the EG players, right? And they had a great Counter-Strike team. I loved all those guys. Traveled around with them. So, and I've just always been player-centric, not anti-owner. I was an owner.
You've done it before.
I loved being an owner. It's a very stressful job. It's very chaotic, and for these owners now, it's even crazier because again, 5 years ago there weren't sports teams with millions and millions of dollars looking to just come grab stuff. They might invest in you. They might just take it from you. So we had different worries, right? Budgets were different, all that, but it's an incredibly tough business.
You don't want to be pushing organizations to make decisions like, we saw PEA make some errors in that regard. You don't want to be doing that from the player side either, right?
No, the idea is not to build an association that is like demanding or like heavy fisted, like we're
first-class flights everywhere.
We're the players. We demand, and that's a lot of my conversations with these players are educating them on what the sports players associations are like and what they cover,
and
why they exist, how they came to be, what they offer players.
And there are some parallels, right, between.
Almost
the same.
It is spot on. The same reason that the NFL needs a player association is the same reason why every esport needs one for their players. Now, I don't think one works for everybody. I think League needs to have their own, and Dota maybe has their own. Overwatch,
that was going to be the next question.
Yeah, because I think that's too many cats to try to herd into one building, so to speak. And while they're all gamers and they're all pros at their game, I think when it gets to what they really, really care about, like the Counter-Strike guys don't necessarily care too much about the Dota guys. I mean, maybe unless they're Dota fans or whatever. But you know what I mean? So now it doesn't mean that this player association can't lead to assisting once we're up and running the Dota guys to do it, or the Overwatch guys to do it, or the League of the guys that should have it already, if you ask me, are the League of Legends guys, because they already have a sports model above them. They have an LCS model, which is the closest to a closed North American league system that exists in a parallel, right? But they don't have.
Who's going to do it? It's not gonna, there's not another Scoots sitting around the league.
Yeah, it either needs a retired player or a guy like me that doesn't have any conflicts, so to speak, of ownership of something, and that again, someone that's passionate about it, right? Could be a couple ex-players, could be old guys like me that are just interested. So why it's necessary? Again, like we're getting to this point where there's tons of money floating around for everybody, right? And not everyone's, don't get me wrong, no one's getting super duper 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 rich yet because it's a lot of investment money, not a lot of like cash out and go home money yet. But the reason the player associations exist in the real world of sports is to protect the livelihood and the interests of those athletes, right? Yeah. To be at the negotiating table for them, for rev share. All major sports in North America have what's called a CBA, Collective Bargaining Agreement, right? And that's a big legal document between the player association, the league, and the team owners, right? And the way most leagues work is the actual team owners own the league. The league itself is like nonprofit. There's been a big debate about, is the NFL league really a nonprofit thing because they make money, but they're kind of owned by the team owners. It's like this weird thing. But the player, it's like a triangle, right? You got your league, you got your team owners,
and the players,
and you got your players association, right? And then obviously you got journalists and sponsors and all that stuff around it. So the idea is that over the years of athletes being mistreated and bad contracts and stuff that kind of shady owners or owners that were protecting their interests over the interests of a player's career, all these sports slowly but surely formed their own associations, right? And in a very similar way, often they would reach out to someone who they trusted outside of the circle and to say, hey, can you help us, right? And like, I won't go into details, but you can just Google some of the history of the North American Player Association, and it's just riddled with these stories of like reserve clauses in baseball where a team owner would own a player to the point where he didn't have to trade him, didn't have to sell him, he could just sit him, and that could literally kill a guy's career.
So slavery.
Yeah, and again, it's like we talked about off camera. It's all about like once you have a business, you want to protect as much of that as you can. Yeah. But eventually there has to be compromise, right? Like an athlete cannot be an indentured servant to the team he plays for. He has to have some of his rights for agents and lawyers and his own money-making stuff. And so I think we're slowly now getting to the point where, for a while, team owners were definitely had to be the only caretaker of a player, right? Because that was the only way a player could get a ride, could get support, if you will.
I mean, that's when you're winning keyboards. That's when you're getting a floor to sleep
on. And you're getting $500 a month or whatever, right? But now, team owners are diversifying what they own and what they do. Team owners have streamers on payrolls that aren't pro players; they're pro streamers, right? PEA wanted to start a league to kind of supplement what they're doing outside of their team ownership and exciting. Another thing to talk to sponsors about and get them excited about and give them money, right? Makes perfect sense. WESA and ESL are doing the exact same thing, and MTG and all those guys over there, right? They're bonding together to do more than what they do alone, right? Now, the scary part about that is I'm a player, and I signed a contract with you. You're my team owner, and part of your job is to protect me from the tournament organizer. We're on that same team, right? If I'm having a problem at the event, you're supposed to have my back, right? Because you're my team owner.
You're almost an agent. You're an agent.
I mean, on paper, you are that player's agent. Yeah. These contracts lay it out that way. All the rights are, and I won't say all, because there are players who have have exceptions to their contracts, but they're the anomaly right now where they have a lot of their rights back.
Right. But the majority.
Like Hiko's a good example. He was able to negotiate last year to where like his stream is kind of his. So it doesn't look like the rest of the team's streams. It's done in green, his colors, all that. He can sell his own sponsorships as long as they don't conflict with his owner's sponsors, right? So and for that, the team pays him less because he's making that money on his own, right? So he's making up that difference on his own. But a lot of teams will just say, okay, here's what we're going to pay you to play. Here's what we're going to pay you to stream.
And these are the rules.
Here's your requirements, right? But often, if that kid could have some of those rights back of his image and his likeness and his streams and stuff, if he was ambitious enough and wanted to be a big kind of streamer, he could take those rights to an agent who could sell and probably make him more than what his team is willing to pay for that part of his contract, right? Yeah. So getting some rights back to players is a big part of this. And there's not these contracts aren't shady. They're not necessarily horrible and bad. They come from a time that we're moving past, right? Right. Everyone is flipping the script on what they do in this, and to the point of when I started with, okay, you're my team owner, you're supposed to protect me, I'm here at this tournament's not going well. Well, what happens if my team owner is the tournament organizer now? Who protects me from you when you're both, right? Those kind of things come into play.
Has that happened?
No, but that would have been a PEA potential, right?
Right, sure.
And again, not to say that the PEA, I don't think the PEA idea at its core was a good idea, not because team owners were doing it, although I just said those kind of conflicts, but that North American Counter-Strike is already oversaturated, and the last thing we need is another online league. We just don't need it, no matter who did it. If you gave me millions of dollars and said, Scott, I'm going to give you boatloads of cash, but this is what you need to do with it, I would say no thank you. Because I just don't think that is needed.
Would you give me a Scoots LAN instead?
Maybe an
I'll take a
one-off
Scoots
event.
LAN. Yeah.
Maybe a one-off event. So, and a player association does all sorts of things. So, like in pro sports, there's legal aid there. There's, in some of the player association, they actually vet agents. Like, you can't be an agent for an NFL player if you're not on the approved agent list from the NFL Player Association, because they vetted them. Because it's a similar situation, right? Kids straight out of high school or straight out of college gets a huge signing bonus to go play for a football team. Millions of dollars swirling around him, sharks coming at him. He doesn't know how to operate that money.
No.
So if an agent comes in and he happens to be a shady one or a lawyer, the kid could lose. And there's stories of that, right? Like players.
I feel like that's happened in esports already. I feel like we've seen that.
Yeah. So part of that for the NFL is, okay, well, here's the list of approved agents. We know that they don't screw these young kids over. They understand what our rules and regulations are to be an agent in this sport. And I'm not sure. I'm still doing a lot of research on all of the organizations. I don't know if they all have that kind of list, but those kind of things. So a brand new kid like Taz doesn't need much help, right? Taz has been through all the systems. He knows by now. He is a guy that's been burned many times, all those kind of things.
Okay, so we can use an example, young up-and-coming player like, you said you don't want to talk too many names, but like, Stewie or Twists or, one of these, like these youngsters, I think they're like 17, 18, who have suddenly got a big contract with one of the biggest organizations in their region, and they're like, yo, that's probably, when I was 16, imagine if someone came up to me and was like, hey, do you want 6 figures to play video games?
Yeah.
I would have no idea what to do. I'd just be like, yeah, sure, here's my life.
And that's what
that's what happens. Yeah.
That's what they do a lot. And again, a lot of them are getting smarter and smarter, and they have lawyers. And a few of them that have been able to get more special contracts get some of those rights back. Can also get an agent involved, right? That kind of helps them with the legal process. One of the things about this player association we want to do is have a legal resource, so that once we're up and running, that even the new kid or the old grizzly veteran has a resource of legal counsel that doesn't care about anything else in esports,
right?
But him. Right, like
he is their priority.
A firm that's not associated with anything else around us. Because again, you don't want any sort of conflict of interest or anything weird going on. And so that kid knows that, hey, can you look at my contract? And when that lawyer comes back to him and says, hey man, this clause, this clause, this clause, he knows he's getting straight shooting advice that is nothing but to help him, right? And obviously part of it is education, and eventually, we slowly, not necessarily drastically change all the player contracts, but there's some clauses that I think need to slowly come back to the player's control.
And just to clarify, you're saying I think it's not just you. Is it just the kind of Scoots and his thoughts, or is there more of a?
I mean, there's definitely a few more people helping.
There's a collaborative effort.
Obviously, when I say I and we a lot, I'm literally talking about me and the players, because obviously I've been talking to you guys for the last month a lot about stuff.
Like, it's not necessarily you saying I don't like this clause. It's 7 people saying this makes me uncomfortable, and you go, I acknowledge that it's uncomfortable.
And one of the things that the players and I have talked about so far is, as we get more truly organized as a legal entity, which is what we're working on right now. Again, the PA's issues kind of passed.
Sure.
So I'm now talking to a lot of the European players, the non-PEA players, because again, during that month of PEA stuff, it was less about starting a player association and more about helping these guys get through this situation. But that leads to now the bigger conversation, right? So those guys are all on board in North America so far, but now it's talking to all the guys here and that are not at the event. And so far, not a single player has said to me, that's a bad idea, why should we do that? They just want to know why, what makes sense, how does it work in the real world? That kid, so it's not me, I'm not a lawyer, right? I would never claim to be. I've had some lawyers in the scene kind of come at me after the PEA letter, kind of like, Scoots isn't a lawyer, I don't know why he's doing this, he shouldn't be representing them. And it's really naive and disingenuous of those gentlemen to think that I don't have legal counsel behind what I'm doing. Like,
sure, of course not.
They're just poking at me. And I think part of it is they want to be the ones maybe doing it and being helpful to the players, and that's very altruistic and great.
But wouldn't you also think that, they could step in? I don't think you'd. I don't think you'd close the door if a lawyer said, "Hey, I want to help."
Yeah,
would you?
Not a single guy that's criticized me has then reached out and said, "Hey, how can I help?" Right?
Yes. Okay.
And that's fine. It is what it is, right? But to think that it's just Scoots all by himself is really naive, right?
Okay.
One of the I'm talking to labor relations people. I'm talking to our legal counsel is a legal counsel for one of the actual player associations of North American sports.
That works.
So again, these are not like just friend lawyers of mine. These are not esports lawyers, and nothing against esport lawyers, right? But they're not people in the scene. So there's some education on that for them in the sense of what we're doing. But they very quickly saw like, oh, this is just like sports was 50 years ago. This is exactly what sports was like 50 years ago.
That's not long.
Right?
I mean, 50 years.
You know,
we're on our way.
So player association, and in basic stuff, right? So once you have a player association, you can sit down with all the players and go, okay, let's talk about tournament formats.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how much space should be at your desk. Like basic things to me, right?
Yeah.
Like let's make sure that you all have a minimum of whatever we feel you need, you know, because you go to these events and like you're turning your keyboard and your mouse and stuff. And how tall should the table be? What kind of monitors? Like minimum stuff. So when these players show up, the tournament organizer is like, oh, we didn't realize, because I've already educated
This is
them,
interesting.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And the players don't have to get there and go, oh, let me get on Twitter and tell them these
do a
PCs
salty
are bad.
tweet.
Yeah, you know. So again, to be proactive with all these organizations, like I've had great conversations.
I like that idea.
Because out of this, the minute I dropped that open letter, like everyone and their mother came at me, both positive and negative, right? I mean, I definitely have my detractors and I definitely have my fans out there, and that's fine, right? But the number of people that came out to me, mostly in private, a few very public tweets, but in private were very supportive, and like a lot of other team owners, obviously the PEA team owners not really happy with me. I understand that. No
hard feelings.
No hard feelings there. You know, I get that. But I've had other team owners come out and go, I want to talk to you. How do I get my players to talk to you? Like very because again, like it's not meant to kill anyone's business. Again, you just gotta look at real sports, right? They belong at the table. They are the labor force of esports, and if they are just tucked in over here and someone else represents everything they do and say, that's just not fair to them, right?
But you want to also acknowledge that you're not going at organisers. You're not going for the throat and the jugular of organisers. I mean, this could be quite a symbiotic relationship.
At the end of the day, when it's all built and said and done, it will be a better space for team
everyone,
owners, how they deal with players, how tournament organizers deal with players, how we all deal with each other. They're all growing it up, and so now it's time for the players to kind of grow up their voice, right?
Sure.
And again, the players aren't always going to agree on it, so there'll be a voting system, just like in the sports PAs that, you know, here's what we need to discuss, guys. And like to the collective bargain agreement idea, I don't know if we'll get to the point where we have a collective bargain agreement with, because that's between one body and one body, right? It's a league to the player association.
Sure.
We have many leagues, we have many events we go to. It's very much an open circuit. But the idea behind it is that you lay it all out on paper and everyone agrees to it, right? And those CBAs go down to everything from like practice conditions when they show up to a venue, locker rooms, hotel rooms, like every rev share.
And this is stuff you've already got kind of in process.
It's public.
It's already.
No, like the sports CBAs are public.
Oh, the
like
CBA. Yeah, sorry, I'm saying like
download it.
A version of your own. Is that in the
Well,
works?
I'm slowly starting to make notes on like the stuff that we should
like
care
the
about.
Size of a desk, the monitor refresh
because you got your big things that I think will take time and effort to kind of change and move, and then you got really basic things, right?
Yeah.
And that, I think a lot of things like tournament formats in the sense of like practice facilities when you're on site, all those kind of things, how many matches you have to play in a day. I think those are all reasonable things that between owners, the league ops, and the players can be resolved.
I mean, it's also you actually just instigating that conversation, because I mean, I know that those conversations are had by one organizer amongst themselves and another organizer amongst themselves, and all that you're doing is kind of saying, hey guys, heads together.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah.
Like, what is the
We're gonna
the
bring
baseline?
it all together, you know.
Okay.
And again, like another big thing that's on everyone's mind right now is just the calendar of the year. Like, you know, if we're oversaturated, and everyone kind of thinks in some regards we are, how do we fix that without losing businesses that are providing the services and the events?
Yeah.
And how do we not decrease the skill level of what we're watching because they're not having a chance to practice? And like Moses did a great tweet.
Navi, I
the
saw
Navi
it as well.
tweet,
Brilliant,
right, where he said like it's amazing to see how Navi is after a month of like being able to practice, right? And I think the Counter-Strike we've seen these last couple of days shows that from a lot of teams that had some really serious boot camps.
How many times have you hosted a desk, right, and the analyst has gone, well, you know, the Mirage was bad 2 months ago, but they haven't had a chance to tighten it up.
Yeah,
you know, like this was bad 2 months ago, so it'll still be bad now, and you just have to sit there and go, right, okay.
And again, it's that fine line. You've got to have enough events to keep everyone getting paid and have the fans have interest. But so, and like out of those Skype groups, like last year, the players said to everyone, they said to their owners, they said to the tournament ops, these 2 weeks in August, don't schedule anything because we're all taking it off. Like, they
Yes.
forced a vacation because there was not one. That was just these guys doing their thing. And I think a few teams didn't abide by it or went and did some stuff, but everyone kind of did, so guys could have some breaks. So if you get everyone in the table, maybe there's a way to sit down and go, okay, hey, your season, why don't you do these 3 months? Because right now, for example, ECS, and if PEA would have decided to go live at the same time and not be, like, compete with all of them, we would have had PEA, ECS, and EPL all try to do their league nights Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday nights, because that's the only nights they can do online stuff, because Friday you start travel somewhere, and Monday you're coming home. So those are their online tournament nights, right? So if we had 3 of those going, instead of now we have 2, right? And this is a hard one because they're all businesses and they all make a lot of money. Like, they make their money on the content, right? They're the broadcast rights and then the content they put out, whether it's YouTube or live. That's what they're monetizing, right? So right now they want to do as much as they can. So EPL has 2 seasons that literally stretch almost the entire year. There's some breaks in between, and there's events in between of weeks and stuff. And ECS is several months long as well. PEA was going to be 3 months long as well. And what I said to all of them, we were never all in one room, but we were having conversations. I've had conversations with the ECS guys. They hit me up after the letter and it's like, hey, I want to talk to you about this player association stuff. Mick, great guy, right? Reached out to me and was like, hey, this is really exciting. Very, very for it. You know, you and I are having a great conversation right now because you're just curious about what's going on. But you understand, Mick, that in 3 months, the association might come to you and go, hey, ECS, this is not cool.
Right.
And he starts laughing. He's like, no, I totally get it. You know, but he is okay with that because it brings that negotiation still brings better structure than everyone has now.
And if the players are happy, then the tournament's going to be better.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not.
And the players like that tournament. They do really good by them. They do 24/7 practice rooms now at the hotel for all the players. So they're already setting some standards that I look at and go, that
2 years time, 3 years time, 4 years time,
or next year. That. Like, these are great ideas that they're already doing for the players. Why can't everybody else, right? And again, the association is not to put anyone out of business. It's not to technically even make them all lose any money. It's really just to kind of, they're all getting organized. Like, the PA is an organized team association of 7 teams.
Organizations,
WESA is a team association with a league attached. So if they can all be competitors, but then organized to be together on stuff, it just makes perfect sense. The players should and could do the same, right? And then when it comes time, we talk to ECS on behalf of the Players Association. We talk, like, again, I negotiated with EPL on behalf of these players, right? And that kind of stuff will continue, right? And again, I would love to have sat down with PEA and said, hey, I think you might be able to figure this out. But don't give it away yet. The players are not saying they don't want to play in PEA. The players are simply saying they don't want to not play in EPL.
Yeah.
You know, and if people don't know what EPL is, it's not just an online league. It is the global online league of Counter-Strike right now. And it's called EPL right now, but it comes out of ESEA's league, and before that, technically the Cal League.
It's been around for forever.
Yeah, so it is like the de facto league in our game. And ECS is a great online league that goes to a LAN tournament as well, and that's what PA was going to be. Nothing wrong with any of those, but like, it's kind of like asking, like, this is this thing that these kids, and it's also, I think the most important thing about it is it's not an invite league. Like, so if you lose your spot,
you qualify. Yeah, you disqualify.
You have to start all the way at the bottom of the farm system and get your, they probably get invited to Premier or whatever, but you still got to win your way into that slot. So that was another big thing for these players. Like, guys like on Cloud9, they won it last season, which doesn't happen very often right now in Counter-Strike Go, right? So now you have to tell these kids, oh yeah, that cool thing you did that North American Counter-Strike hasn't done in forever.
Lifted a trophy in Sao Paulo for nearly $1 million.
Guess what? You can't defend that title.
Okay, I see, right.
And so, like, that was part of it. It wasn't just that their owners were saying, hey, we don't want you to compete in this event. It's the nature of this event, right? But
feeling like something they worked for was taken away.
Yeah, and I could see if it was some, like, out of the blue, like, never heard of before league that everyone was nervous about.
Yeah.
I could see the conversation between the players and the owners being like, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this, right? But I still think, and the players think, that the days of them just doing whatever their owners want them to do, because their owners, again, interests have not changed, but shifted in some regards. I think the players definitely think, as they voted, need to definitely be more directly involved in these kind of decisions, right? It's because while it does affect the brands of the teams
Sure.
it also very much affects the brands of all these players, right? Of where they play and where they don't play.
And they do have individual brands. Don't let that be understated as well.
Big time, right?
That's forgotten quite quickly.
Yeah, and we see like how big the brands are when you see these teams leave organized brands that have been around for decades or decades, like Dignitas, and they go and start their own brand new team.
Yeah, which is coming.
And they don't skip a beat. And that's no offense to Dignitas or any of the established endemic teams, but the sway of the fans is, I think, geared more towards players and then the team they play for. I don't want to say that like no one cares about the team and only cares about players, because there's definitely, the big brands have market cachet in that sense. Like there are fanatic fans that will watch them no matter who the roster is.
Oh, and they have all of the gear. And my example was going to be, Optic and FaZe, where I've literally had people in Twitch chat or tweets that only are asking, they're only there because they're following the brand. It does exist.
Absolutely.
And that's something that's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, and again, it's great. I mean, that like Optic has probably done the best job on the planet.
So good,
the Green Wall is legendary. And it was great when they got into Counter-Strike, we were all like, yeah, because you do want...
Zero complaints,
and they're FPS guys, but they're console FPS guys, right, for the most part. So, and a lot of them play Counter-Strike and already cared about it, but when they embraced the professional side of it, it was like, the Green Wall is going to come, right? And that's great. So yes, there are brands that, and fans of brands, again, much like traditional sports, I just don't think it's as even. Right, I think it weighs more towards a player fan than a team brand fan, and even in different games, it might
I would argue that's the same in some sports. I think there's there are some crazy fans, but there was also I'm a Ronaldo fan. Yeah,
wherever he goes. Or I love this quarterback and this running back wherever he gets traded, or basketball player, or whatever. Yeah. So
there are an absurd amount of parallels between sports and esports.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We should probably say our goodbyes before we kill another battery. So your final words, closing thoughts on players' rights and your movement forward. I mean, this is a project you're planning on embracing for a large period of time, right? You're not just hanging out for a month or two.
No. Again, we're well on the way to kind of building it. We've gone from the phase where the players think they need one to now reaching out to me to help them build one, to now like figuring out how you build one, because you've got players all around the world. How do you legally build an entity that can represent them in some matters? Obviously, we're not there to be their agent or their all those things, but you're an agent in some regards for the collective, right? So we're figuring that out. Again, the legal teams are helping me with how do you put it on paper?
It probably doesn't exist. There's probably no example of a completely international agency.
Well, in some regards, the sports ones are international because they're not all American players.
No,
right?
okay.
All these sports,
hockey and
all these sports have foreigners, so very similar in some regards. But what's different is the NBA worries about the NBA league. We have to worry about EPL and DreamHack and StarLadder and everyone else who throws an event.
And those are voices at the table. They will be voices at the table.
And again, we're not meant to. We're not. The players are not here to put anyone out of business or disrupt the world of esports, but to kind of add structure to their livelihood, to their career, to protect it. And I think one of the biggest things that the most endearing thing that I've gotten out of this with players is I've had tons of players when we started this, and still even yesterday I had a guy that was talking to me and he's like, I know that what we're doing right now is going to help us with some things that, in my career we're going to fix some things right now. We already are. But I know that in 5 years we would have helped secure a career path for the next generation, right? And that, because a lot of times players only care about themselves, and anyone in the world, right? Not necessarily players, but you're in the moment, you're okay, what's in it for me? I'm worried about this year, I'm worried about this month. So for these younger people to say to me, Scott, I get it. We're going to do a little bit now for me, but if I retire in 2 years, the legacy of what we're building will protect, I want to say future generations of the sport. It's easy to say in sports, but it's hard to say in our game because you don't know.
Dude,
But I think some version of Counter-Strike is going to continue for a while.
A 12-year-old who's watching this video on Yahoo Esports could very well be helped by that very organization,
Knock on wood, man. Knock on wood.
Let's do it. All right. This has been Alex. This has been Scott. We've been talking to you a little bit about players' rights. Thanks for joining us here on Yahoo Esports.